Today's edit is the perfect answer to the question, why do we edit? Check it out, we're gonna take this wildlife shot that I took in Costa Rica and turn it into an absolutely amazing version of itself. Generally, the techniques we're gonna use are super simple. There's only one that is a little bit more tricky, and I'm gonna guide you through as usual. Let's jump into Photoshop. So let's zoom back out and let's do a minor adjustment first. Check out this green on the very top here, it's super green. But in wildlife shots like this, I actually like it to be more on the blue side of things. And we'll do a lot more to this later, but we're gonna start by simply creating a hue saturation layer, head to the greens, and just push the greens into the blues a little bit. So let's go with maybe something like this. If you look at the top right corner, you'll see that takes this super green heat out of it a little bit. But it's only the first step. The next step is the one that's a little bit more tricky, but don't worry. Check out the background. As you can see, it's not super blurred, but I want it properly blurred. But if I want to blur the background, I have to make sure I don't affect our little animal friend, right? So what I need to do is I need to separate our animal from its background. To start, on your keyboard, let's hit Command or Control, Option, Shift and E and create a stamp visible. So now we just have a layer in the bottom right corner that has our little adjustment already in it. With that layer selected, we're gonna go to Select and then Subject. It's just gonna try to identify the things that are in focus and that make sense as a subject. But as you can see, it didn't select everything, right? Like our rock and stuff, and I do need that because I don't want to blur that. So within our toolbar, we're gonna grab the Quick Selection tool. We can make it a little bit bigger, maybe do something like this, and now we're just gonna go ahead and add to our selection the things that we like. In this case, basically all the parts of the stone and all the parts of our little animal friend. Don't forget the tail as best as possible. Now don't worry if there are some, irregularities in the selection. We're gonna fix this in a moment. Okay, here we have this little hole. So we're gonna make sure we don't take this. So I'm gonna hold the Option key. I'll make it a bit smaller. Hold the Option key and simply tap in it once. So we deselect that area again. Now we just make sure we have everything we want. We have the top, we have this. This looks good as a starting point. Now, the problem is we have quite a depth of field, right? So we have things that are super in focus, like our dude himself, and then we have things that are not really in focus, like the background or the tail, or even parts of our dude, like this stuff on his head. So we need to refine our selection. We do that by simply going to Select, and then down to Select and Mask. Here we can refine our mask, and if we look at the mask, it's obviously not perfect, especially down here, but it's also very, very harsh on these kind of edges here. So what I'll do with the settings that you can see on the right hand side here, I'll just move my little cursor over the edges of our subject. And when you do that, you essentially ask Photoshop, can you please check that edge again and make sure you actually make the right selection and maybe don't make it as harsh. And you can see that the edge becomes softer, right? And that's what I want because then you're gonna have a more realistic cutout of your subject. So we're gonna continue this until we, have done the rounds. Okay, now we have a quite nice selection. Once we're done, we're simply going to hit OK, and I'm going to hit Command or Control and J on my keyboard to place that selection onto its own layer. So now we basically have our little friend here. And now that he has his own layer, we can now take the original background layer, this one right here, and go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. Now for your picture, of course, you're going to have to find a value that you like, right? So I'm going to experiment a little bit, just keep sliding until you find a value that works for you. I think I'm going to go with something like this. Once done, we're going to hit OK. And if we enable now our little friend that we separated prior, you can see that we have blurred the background more and he is completely in focus and sharp. But you see he has a little bit of a halo, right? Because we have blurred his equivalent in this background image right here. Easy fix, make sure you have the background layer selected, hit Command or Control and T on your keyboard, and then hit that little toggle here up on top. Because now we can drag and drop our image and just sort of squeeze it together a little bit. Check it out, I'm just gonna grab it here, I'm gonna pull it inwards. I'm gonna grab it here, I'm gonna pull it downwards and inwards. I'm gonna grab this little button on the side here to make sure we fill our canvas again. The beauty of a blurred background is definitely that you don't have to be afraid of losing any detail, because who cares? And if we move our pieces right and make sure he is the only sharp one that we have, then we can hit enter. No, wait, there's one more. Okay, just like that. We can hit enter and now we have a beautifully blurred background compared to especially how it was before, right? And he is still super sharp and we have all the pieces of him. Now, of course, now we have to merge them back together, right? So we're going to hit Command or Control, Option, Shift and E to create a stamp visible and merge everything you can see onto a separate layer again. So let's start to edit our image itself. Let's work on him for a moment. Let's head to filter and then simply the camera raw filter. I want to start making him pop a little more, right? So we can simply use clarity for that. Of course, as always, for your photo, find something you're comfortable with. I'm going to go with something like this maybe. I'm going to hit OK. I don't want this everywhere, so I'm going to drop a layer mask on that. Hit Command or Control and I to invert the layer mask. And with a white brush, I'm just going to paint in the effect on our little dude here. Sweet. If we look at the before and after, he has a little bit more. Let me zoom in. He has a little bit more definition, which I definitely like. Cool. Let's move on to work on the greens again, right? Because they're still far too green. So we're going to head to adjustments. We're going to go to Hue Saturation layer. We head to the greens again. And once more, we're going to push those greens towards the right-hand side to maybe something like this. I'm also going to bring down the saturation just a little bit. And also the lightness just a little bit, maybe something like this. Now we're slowly getting our colors where we want them, at least for the greens. But as I always do, let's circle back to that in a moment. For now, I realized the stone was super bright, so I'm going to grab a quick curve adjustment layer. I'm just going to bring it down. Bringing it down a lot, and I'm only looking at that stone in the foreground right now. Maybe something like this is not bad. Let's hit Command or Control and I to hide the effect by inverting the layer mask. Hit G on the keyboard for greatness. Grab a linear gradient and make sure to place that only at the stone area right here. And of course, position your gradients in a way that makes you happy. I'm going to go with something like, maybe something like this. Sweet, now that stone is not in your face anymore, right? But what I want to create in general is a sort of darker feel on the left-hand side of the photo and a very bright feel on the right-hand side on the top here. So to start that, let's create another curve adjustment layer and simply bring it down a little bit, maybe to something like this. Of course, I don't want this everywhere, but I still have my gradient selected, and it's time that we switch over to the radial gradient. So let's hit that and drag that in there, but we're gonna uncheck reverse. So now we can basically select where's the darkness and where's the brightness. So making sure his head is still somewhat in the light, let's go with something like, maybe something like this. Cool, now that we have darkened the left side of the photo, we want to enhance or brighten the right side of the photo. So let's go back to adjustments and we're going to go to curves. First we'll switch it back on and we're going to increase the brightness. Maybe to something like this. And just like before, we're going to use our gradient tool to bring that in where we want. This time though, we're going to have to hit that reverse button. And now place that brightness, the sort of spot of attention, wherever you feel like in your photo. I'm going to go for something like maybe here. Cool, now that we have that, the greens here are super strong, so let's bring them down just a notch. Create a hue saturation layer, head to the greens, and just bring down the greens to whatever you like. I'm gonna go with -24, just a little bit. Here comes one of my favorite parts, which is the color grading. Check this out, we're gonna create another stamp visible, and we're gonna go to filter and the camera raw filter again. Yes. Here we're gonna go all the way down. And now check it out, I'm gonna start to move the sliders of the red primary, and I'm gonna bring that up to, let's say, 24. And the saturation to, let's say, 20. For our green, I'm going to go even harder, so let's bring that up to something like this. And also the saturation quite strongly. The blues we're going to bring down a little bit, so let's go maybe something like this. But bump up that saturation a little bit. And now check this out, this is the before color and the after color, or if we hit OK, we can see it a little bit larger. Check this out, the before color and the after color. I love the sort of red that comes out of this area of our animal friendo, or also the green that has now shifted more into the blue area, right? We are getting there. Let's continue by actually darkening the head a little bit. Don't you have the feeling he's very bright? So let's create a curve adjustment layer. And again, that's something you have to try for your own images. I'm just looking at the head right now. I want to make sure I don't darken him too much. Like this is obviously kind of weird, right? But a little bit. So play with your curve until you find a value that kind of works for you. I might go with something like that. Once I have that, I'm going to hit Command or Control and I to hide the effect and invert the layer mask and use a white brush to bring that in ever so slightly where his head is a little bit too bright for my taste. Okay, that's much better. Now he's not kind of burning anymore, right? And what we can do now, we can enhance his eye a little bit. We don't even need much. Just another curve adjustment layer. And just looking at the eye, I want to bring out this beautiful brown that's in there to just increase that brightness to maybe something like that. Hit Command or Control and I, and just like before with the white brush, tap that in to your liking. Just like that. This is great. Just a little bit of attention on the eye there. Perfect. Now, once more, I want to increase the brightness in the top right corner, so I'm just going to create another curve adjustment layer. Bring that brightness up like stupid, and I mean like stupid. Don't do this because that's weird, but go quite harsh. Maybe something like this even. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to cheat at the end a little bit. And once more with Command or Control and I, I'm going to hide the effect, hit G for my gradient tool and just use the radial gradient. Why is this so difficult for me? To bring that into our image. Maybe something like this looks good. Oh yeah, I like that. What I don't like though is all that green, so I'm going to grab a Hue Saturation layer and just bring down the greens a little bit and use the same technique as always to bring that into our photo. Nope, I need that. Next, we're going to give it a bit more oomph, so we're going to create another stamp visible. We're going to change the mode from normal down to soft light, and then we're going to go to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur again. So what I'm basically doing is I'm applying a very soft Orton effect. So use a blur option that suits you. I might just go with this, but I'm going to use a layer mask and a black brush to remove the effect from our friend here. So it's mostly just the background I want to affect to make it a little bit more dreamy. That's fine. There we go. That is a sweet before and after difference. Nice. Now comes the part where we want to cheat a bit because I need way more brightness in the top right, but not just color, like any kind of color or shapes. I just want the attention on our animal. So I'm going to create a new layer, Command or Control Option Shift and N, and I'm going to fill that layer with white. Now I'm going to hit G again to get my gradient tool, and I'm going to use a layer mask. I'm going to invert that layer mask, and now I'm going to use that gradient tool to bring in this sort of white. And that white will make it so that the attention is really on our animal and not on the top right corner because there is nothing over there. So let's bring it into maybe something like this. So this looks good. Now, of course, this is very white, right? So what we can do, we can grab a Hue Saturation layer, hit Command or Control and Option as well as G to clip that onto our white layer we just created. And now we can say colorize and just move around our sliders to add a little bit of green to this thing. Maybe something like this, and a little bit reduced lightness, maybe something like this. There we go. It's a small difference, but now we don't just have white, right? Now, once you add your white, don't forget to use a brush, a black brush, and make sure you remove that white, of course, from the face of our animal, so it's not covering up any detail. It would be kind of a pity to lose that detail after we added clarity at the beginning, right? And there we go. Within a couple of minutes, we went from, let me see, this is the one we started with, and this is what we ended up with. Now, if that's not a big difference, I don't know what is. Look at this beautiful color grade now, this red and this green, and well, the blue-green in the background. It's just, for me, it's a completely different photo. Just love it. And that is why we edit. But that is it for today's edit, and I hope you enjoyed it and saw once more that Photoshop does not have to be a beast you can't tame. You just need a couple of tools and you get everything you need. Now, as usual, I'm going to keep editing and I shall see you in the next video. Have a good one.